Welcome to all you storm watchers, storm chasers, and Leanierologists out there. Welcome to another session of Tempest Talks. Today, we're going to be starting our discussion on linkage and flow, which is the second stage of our Imai process of continuous improvement. Today, we have my good friend Peter with us, and Peter is a first-time author who likes to make people feel good. Peter and I crossed paths during the 33 plus years he led multi-million-dollar aerospace programs with a Fortune 100 company. In 2019, after his son successfully battled brain cancer, Peter took early retirement to follow his passion to help children and adults connect with their own imagination and creativity through his storytelling. Dragons on the Purple Moon is the first of many adventures Peter is creating to bring joy and happiness to children, especially those with cancer. He is originally from England and now lives with his wife and puppy in Santa Barbara, California. Thank you so much for joining me, Peter. It's great to see you.
Yeah, thanks for asking me, Michelle. I look forward to it.
Is there anything that I missed in your background?
I don't think so. I mean, the only thing might be that when I retired from, I think UTC probably, as we were then, I retired as a director of programs for, I had the 737NG program. C5 had kind of finished by then, but I had the C5 pilot and nacelle, and then also 767 program. So I was kind of split between Boeing and Lockheed and GE actually for a period of time.
Awesome. That's perfect. That's quite a few programs.
Yeah.
And very high profile programs at that.
Yeah.
Very much so. Thank you. So as many of you have noticed with our lean progress, this is the second tool in our lean toolbox from the Imai process, which is called linkage and flow. So if we follow that Imai process, like we talked about last month, the process of continuous improvement starts with 5S, then linkage and flow, which we're talking about today, followed by standard work and visual controls, and then following up with real-time problem resolution, or RTPR. Does it make sense, Peter, that linkage and flow is the second phase of a continuous improvement journey, and why?
Right. So first of all, it's interesting this because since I've been writing my books, I've been using a completely different side of my brain as I was when I worked at Royal Goodrich UTC. So it's been interesting kind of planning for this and thinking, getting back into that old vernacular, so to speak, using a different side of the brain and just kind of remembering everything that we went through as an organization. So to me, I mean, let's just start with this because I'm going to say this a lot during the conversation, that every lean event is laid out pretty much the same way.
Yes.
You document reality, you identify waste, and you eliminate waste. And basically, that's your redo loop. You just keep doing that over and over again. That's for every single event.
Thank you.
So, yeah. So linkage and flow, I mean, I would say 5S and linkage and flow is pretty much like 1A and 1B. Because you've got to have some sort of 5S done before you can really start looking at linkage and flow, because you don't know what you might find if you've got, tools, under tools and stuff like that, so
totally.
You've got to have that base. But then once you've got that base, I don't know whether you were in Chula Vista at the end of the 90s when we first did the huge spaghetti chart, and I know you've seen it, but
I've seen it. I was not there. Yeah.
Right. So I was there for that CV Ops spaghetti chart, which became the bookmark for all our kind of lean activities, and that's the prime example of linkage and flow.
Totally.
We went and we did everything in CV Ops and how it all fitted together, and we call it a spaghetti diagram because there's just lines all over it of back and forth of tools and people. But it just showed how much part travel there was and how much people travel there was that kind of went along with it. So
well, and the facility was huge at that point in time too, wasn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And we had a lot of monuments as well. That we still have to a certain extent in Chula Vista, but it was an interesting time to get started in that. So
For sure.
yeah. And then what was the second part of the question?
Why do you think that's this?
Oh,
And why is it important that it's the
yeah.
second
Well,
phase?
I've kind of covered that. I think
Yeah.
it's really important because it's your baseline, and really, again, as well with documenting reality. I mean, the other tool that you use with every event, or you should have and start off with, is a standard worksheet, and that
Yes.
is your flow and linkage. So you've got your standard worksheet, and you should be able to go back to that every event and make changes where things have changed. So
Yeah.
it's the starting point along with 5S, and from that you can kind of dig deeper into the results that you come up with. Find waste, and which is what it's all about, finding waste, and then removing that waste.
Yes. Thank you so much for bringing up the Kaizen event process, because I don't think many people actually recognize it as being a process and that
Right.
it's the same every
Yeah,
single time.
that's right. It absolutely is.
Yeah.
That's standard work for a lean event. And as long as you follow that, you're in pretty good shape.
Yeah, we even had at that point in time when it was Goodrich, we even had standard work for a Kaizen event,
Yeah, right,
and linkage and
right.
flow was part of that.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
Yeah,
like I said, I mean, along with 5S, linkage and flow are the two things that, and EH&S as well. I mean,
yeah, of
you
course.
do every single event. I mean, you don't. In theory, you don't really need to have its own 5S event or its own EH&S event or its own linkage and flow, because you should be covering every single event. That
Yes,
doesn't always happen. I know I've been at events before, and the first thing that somebody asks is, where's the standard worksheet? And sometimes the standard worksheet doesn't get documented. I mean, that was
yeah,
one of the things that I found. So then you've got to go back and create it. But you
totally.
need that you need that baseline so you can see where you've come from. And what you're trying to do is, I mean, you're trying to create least waste way. So whether
Yes,
there's a monument or whether there's anything else, it really doesn't matter. You're creating nirvana, and then you
yes.
work towards that and do the best that you can.
I love that. Exactly. Because that's why, last month we talked a lot about 5S on this program, and
Right.
5S, a lot of teams get stuck in
Yeah.
5S and they
Right.
don't really know how to take it to the next level. But
Right.
really 5S, you're absolutely right. It's the first stage, because you got to clear out all of that
Yeah.
stuff
Yeah.
so that you can see the flow, how it
Yeah.
should be,
Yeah.
and then link those programs together.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. So like we've already covered this somewhat with what you feel that linkage and flow actually means. But
Right.
why do you think people have a hard time grasping the concept of linkage and flow? Why do they get stuck in 5S and
Yeah.
not able to move?
Right. Well, I think some of it is that it does get wrapped up in other events. I think like
Mm,
cell layout for lean transformation, for example. I mean, linkage and flow that's part of your cell layout.
yeah,
Like value stream mapping as well. I think it maybe gets kind of wrapped up in that. You do a value stream map and you've got all your flows and everything in there, so it's not
yeah,
especially called flow and linkage. And yeah, even in the business process as well, where you do a value stream map, so it's the same thing. You're looking at flows there. You don't call it a flow and linkage map, you call it a value stream map, but it
yeah,
really
totally.
is flow and linkage. So
Yeah,
I think people, and as well with flow and linkage, some decisions are already made for you, because
yes,
you've got centers of excellence, for example. I mean, I know at Goodrich, we had Mexicali for Fab,
yes,
Riverside for Bond, CV for Fab as well, and also Foley for assembly, and then we've got some smaller satellite plants as well for assembly.
yeah,
But they're the major ones. So you work around the centers of excellence, and you can still have your own cell within that center of excellence, and then that cell can be flow and linkaged out. You can do a flow and linkage event on that particular cell within that particular facility. So
totally. Oh,
you
yes.
can still get down to that level. It's just a question of drilling down. And that some of the issues that you might get into there is that you've got a facility that's doing their own events as well, and then you're as a value stream kind of going in and trying to do the best thing for your value stream. So there is a lot of communication that needs to happen with the actual facility. But I found a lot of the time once you go in as a value stream and do something, that model can be copied for other cells as well.
Oh my goodness,
so
yes.
You don't just have to go in and do it by yourself. It can definitely be helpful to the facility, and then whatever the facility does can be helpful for the value stream as well.
Oh my goodness, I'm so glad you mentioned that, because sometimes I guess people get overwhelmed with the concept of linkage and flow, because I'll be honest, when I got out of school, I hadn't heard the term linkage and flow or flow and linkage. The term that I learned was continuous flow or one piece flow or one piece pull.
One piece pull,
so those were the terms that I was taught. And so it took me a little while being in the environment with the culture, of course, of Goodrich, which was phenomenal. Being involved in that culture, that I understood it's not just about one piece pull, it's about the linkage to the other things as well. Like you were talking about with the linkage to the actual facility itself or the site itself. But they often get confused with, well, this is my value stream, so I'm looking from, customer order to customer delivery or pay when we get paid for it. So I'm looking along that value stream, but not really thinking about, well, this portion of the product goes to facility A, and then this one goes to facility C because it's a center of excellence, or even in that sense, you could kind of call a site a monument, right?
Yep, absolutely. Yeah.
So I love the fact that you brought up that there's lots of different layers and levels and flight levels to linkage and flow as well. Often people get overwhelmed with the big picture, but they don't really see the little flow.
Yeah, no, and that's what a value stream map does for you. Actually, you've got, and you really do need the big picture. I mean, you need that to actually see what's going on and see, if it makes sense to change anything. And so, and then you start with the value stream map, and then you kind of chunk the value stream map out into various events, and then you have the events that have the most impact on the value stream and the company. And if it's the company, it's also the facility as well. So you do have to definitely look, and you do, as a value stream leader, you've got to have a lot of relations with all the plant facilities, because that's where you get a lot of stuff done, just in the actual physical communication, relations and communication, as well as the culture as well. I know we'll talk about culture a little bit later, but that's all important to actually, get the stuff completed that you've done during an event.
Yeah, it almost makes me wonder if people get so wrapped up in the 5S portion, because that's something that they can immediately relate to.
Right.
Maybe they have a harder time understanding what flow actually means. But I remember an event, I think we both were on that event. It was a complex event with multiple programs. So I believe it was all programs, and we were trying to figure out, believe it or not, a new way of doing finance.
Right.
And that event essentially was a linkage and flow event.
Right.
More so than it was about finance in and of itself. And I remember the folks that were not as familiar with the ways of Goodrich having a real hard time understanding, well, no, I want this way because it's the way I've always done it.
Exactly.
Versus the big group of the Goodrich folks that were like, well, no, we need to think about linkage to the other programs and how it impacts them too. It's a different way of thinking. It really is. Linkage and flow is a different way of thinking. So have you also heard of this being called something else besides linkage and flow?
Well, I mean, I think we referred to it as flow and linkage first, and then it got flipped around to be linkage and flow. A couple of years later. And be quite honest, I'm not really sure what the difference is. I mean, it means the same thing, but
Right.
I mean, whether you've got linkage first or flow first, I'm not really sure. I guess the flow, you know, I mean, that's more of the parts than the linkage is kind of linking everything together.
Yeah.
But yeah.
It's more like a semantics kind of thing.
Yeah, I think so. Or just, you know, the thinking of the day. It makes more sense to do, say, linkage and flow rather than flow and linkage.
Yeah. Well, and that also shows the beauty of continuous improvement as well, right? The
Yeah,
more that we learn,
right.
we may change our terminology. So like me, for
Yeah,
instance, I decided that karate terms were a bit too harsh and not
yeah,
everybody really relates to karate terms,
right,
but
right,
everybody has dealt with weather. And
right,
so being a storm watcher, I see the problem
right,
and I just don't know how to handle it. A storm chaser, I see the problem and I've got some of the tools in my toolbox to handle it. And then a linearologist, I can predict the storm that's coming as
right,
well as apply the proper tools to it. So
right.
with more learning and training, language changes.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And it is a language as well. You know, I was going to say that up front as well. You know, there's some terms that we definitely use that, you know, people would kind of just look at you like, what?
Oh, yeah.
What?
Continuous flow. What?
Yeah, right. I mean, you do get into your own particular, and it is interesting as well, the people that used it more, you know, that were in events with like first timers, that you'd have to kind of spend a little time bringing the first timers up to speed just with the, you know, the actual language that you're talking, because it is a little different.
Yeah, that, and then on top of it being in aerospace
Yeah,
was also its own
yeah,
language.
right. Yeah, with everything that we've got at an aerospace as well. That is true.
It was wild. I remember one event, it was almost entirely in acronyms.
Yeah, no, I know, I can imagine. Easily done.
Yeah.
Then I did just mention though about you know, like a first timer. I mean, first timers are really important as well, because it's that
Yes.
outside set of eyes that you need. Because sometimes, even though you're using the lean tools and you're doing things that you think are correct, you know,
Yeah.
you can get in your own little bubble and just kind of wrapped up in the details. So you do
Yeah.
need that outside set of eyes, and they can be like, well, you know, why don't you do this? It's
Yes.
like, oh, okay, yeah, that makes sense. Then the team kind of looks at it and, you know, and determines that maybe that's a good idea, and you know, that changes the whole group's thinking then as well. So that's a group dynamic.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about that before. Would you say that outside eyes are even more necessary on a linkage and flow
Yeah,
type event?
I think so, because it's like I said earlier, it's the big picture really that you're kind of looking at, but then it does break down into, you know, a cell layout event, which is particular to a value stream within a facility, and your team is figuring out the best way to a flow and linkage for parts and people going through your cell. So,
Yeah.
you know, it's really necessary that you have somebody from the outside who's like, you know, well, you know, how come you can't move this drive-matic, for example? Because
Yeah.
drive-matics were always considered a monument, but you know, on the 737NG in Foley, we did our cell layout with being able to move the drive-matic and put it in line so that, you know, you've got less movement of people and parts. And I think that makes a big difference, because sometimes, you know, you do get wrapped around, well, I can't go to this facility because that's not the center of excellence, or, you know,
Yeah.
I can't move this machine because, you know, we've never moved that machine before. But then when you talk about it, you realize, well, actually, you know, you can move a drive-matic machine. You know,
Yeah.
not that big. You've got a forklift and you just lift it up and you just put it where you need it to be, and
Yeah.
it makes a huge difference. Huge difference. I
Yeah.
mean, as part of our cell layout as well on the 737, we also we did the whole analysis, the return on investment for buying a robotic rivet installing machine. So we did that, and that was in line as well. It wasn't off in a different building or a different room. It was right in line. And we, the guys within the value stream, the guys that were actually pretty much putting the parts through the robot, they were the ones that learned how to fix it. We got so much support from the company that installed it for us.
Wow.
But it was the team that had to learn, because stuff happened on a daily basis that you didn't know about until you actually had run it for a period of time. So
Yeah.
I mean, we had, and it went really well. We had the occasional time where the robot's down and it's like, oh my God, what do we do? But
Right.
you just you make the call, and if they can't get out there, we'd also got Drivematics that we could still. So it's the same process. The Drivematic and the robot were doing the same thing. Just thought the robot would do it 5 times quicker.
Yeah.
But it ran pretty well, and it enabled us to reduce flow time and reduce cost and inventory as well.
Yeah, I love the fact that you brought up the Drivematic and how it was previously thought that it was a monument,
Right.
that it had to be in this other this other room. I think the clean tanks were the same way too, weren't they?
Yep.
And they end up on the line.
Yeah, I mean, they definitely could. I mean, and that would be Nirvana. I mean, obviously we've got Riverside, which is our center of excellence for processing, and then also Foley have got their own processing line as well.
Yeah.
But there's ways you can, if it's not in line, there's ways that you can kind of improve the flow and linkage anyhow, with like bus stops and things like that, so that parts go. They're going at a certain time every day, so your parts need to be there to
right.
So that
tack time, right?
Yeah, right. Tack time. Yeah. On the 737, our tack time was like 1 hour and 50 minutes at the end. So
fast.
We were building 4 units a day, 4 and a little bit a day, when we were at 42 airplanes a month. So
it's amazing.
It's a good opportunity to go through and do a lot of the stuff, even though it sounds overwhelming at 42 airplanes a month. But it's really good, because you can see, because it turns so quickly that you can kind of see opportunities real time, so to speak.
Yes, definitely. It's interesting how closely tack time relates to linkage and flow as well, because a lot of people get tack time confused with cycle time.
Right.
And we'll talk about cycle time for all the watchers and listeners. We'll talk about that in a different one. Right. But for tack time, it being the drum beat, you really have to pay attention to the linkage and flow of all these moving parts so that they do arrive on time in that particular place. Because
if one part doesn't arrive on time, it can mess with the whole line.
The whole flow.
So then you've got to get into, well, can I do this work in a different station? Most of the time you can, so the line keeps moving. But if you can't, then you've got an actual line stop. And that's not good when you've got 4 units a day. I mean, the only way you catch up is overtime, after work or on weekends. But again, on the 737, when we were running at that rate, we had some major issues with some shortages, supplier and some our own. But the team at Foley did such a great job. Their culture was to make sure that we get the part to the customer when they need it, and they do everything to make sure that was the case. And parts not arriving is a significant problem when you go through a process. Like I said, if you really can't install that part anywhere else at that station, then you do have a real problem. And that's when you do a line stop, and then it comes up, and then I get involved, and if I need to get other people involved, then that's kind of what you do to make sure that everybody's aware of the issue, and then do what you can to resolve it.
Totally. From a linkage and flow perspective on a personal level, so I recently moved, and some folks may not think of linkage and flow in this sense, but on a personal level, there's a lot of linkage and flow that happens in moving. because you've got to make sure that everything is prepared by the time that the moving truck arrives, or that stuff's out of the way so that you can put stuff on the moving truck and then you can move it. And if you're doing any form of renovation, then you've got to make sure that's done before you move furniture in. There's a lot of linkage and flow that I think people don't realize that they do every day.
Right.
And since your retirement, have you noticed anything like that as well? Your own personal life?
With my kids' books that I'm writing now, so kids' picture books, there's a process and flow involved with that. You've got, and this, I've learned all this just over the last couple of years, but you've got your manuscript that you write, and then you kind of get your then you get your manuscript edited by somebody, almost like an outside set of eyes. I mean, well, it is an outside set of eyes. So you don't, I mean, you can have family members help with the editing, but it's not the same as somebody that really knows, grammatically what it needs to be. I mean, and it's just a slight change, a comma in a different place, or exclamation point that's not correct or whatever. But just important stuff, to make sure that you're doing. So you do that editing, and then you kind of get your illustrator, and because I don't illustrate, so I had to get somebody to do that for me. So she went through and did all the illustrations, and there's a process involved with just the illustrations as well. Then you get it. Then you get the illustrations done. Then that goes off to somebody who's familiar with Adobe InDesign, and in that process, you kind of put everything together. You basically format the interior of the book, but then it gets published. So I noticed the first time around that I was still doing a lot of rewrites to my manuscript, kind of further down the process than I should have been doing. So I was doing a lot of redo loops going along. So the second time that I'm coming through and doing my book this time, I realized that I was doing too many redo loops the first time, and I made sure my manuscript is really been done the way it should be done up front, and then it's been edited, and then that is pretty much my final manuscript. There might be tweaks to it, but I'm not going to be rewriting a whole page like I did with my first one to fit in with the illustrations, because sometimes the illustrations couldn't be done exactly how I thought it was, and there still might be a little bit of that, but in general, I think I've got a much better process now and a much better system in place where I make sure that it's done at the appropriate place. So like I said, you don't have to do the redo loops.
Yeah, it's like a gate process.
Yeah.
So just like if you're releasing a product or producing a product, you've got gates that need to be met in a certain flow. Interesting. I wouldn't have ever thought about that, but it makes complete sense. That's 100% linkage and flow.
It really is. I mean, linkage and flow is any process. Really, it could be a business process, it can be a home process. I mean, just around the house, just a real simple example is writing a check. I mean, you want it's linkage and flow, so you want to get your point of use. So, you want everything there. You want your stamps there, you want your envelope there, you want your checkbook there, you want your pen there, all in the same place. So, I mean, even now I find myself running upstairs sometimes to where my checkbook is. It's like, wait a minute, why
is it up there?
Checkbook, why don't I keep it where I'm actually doing the bills, which is downstairs? So, that's a really simple example of, looking at linkage and flow, even though you may not be thinking of it as linkage and flow.
Yeah, it's like the kitchen too. When we were setting up the kitchen, as I look towards it, when we were setting up the kitchen, we thought the same thing, where it's like, where does it make sense for the pots and pans to go? They should be point of use, right? Where we use them. Kind of thing too. Oh, that's great. So then, having worked in both a lean organization and a non-lean organization, how has linkage and flow made the biggest difference in performance or expected performance?
Well, I think the biggest thing that, and we just kind of mentioned it with point of use, but that's the first thing that kind of comes out of it. I mean, you'll remember from the standard work events that you
Yeah.
used to have initially. I mean, you're doing you're doing the observation, and how many times you wrote down,
Oh my goodness.
go get this tool, go get that tool, or
Yes.
go get this primer, go get this paint. And so, you get your point of use, and you get rid of all the go gets from your standard work, and that's saving you, people movement and part movement. So,
Yeah.
you're getting towards that least waste way that's really important.
Yeah, it's so true. Oh my goodness. Well, and what was it that Greg used to always share with us? The chart. Well, there was the Dave Castagnola Wheel of Opportunity
Yeah,
that we always had, and then
right.
there was the Greg Peters chart of least waste way or something like that, where
Yeah,
it would show
yeah, vaguely remember that.
the removing of all the waste in
Right,
the time and how it's
right.
like an exponential curve, not
Yeah,
a
right, right.
yeah,
Yeah,
based on
because
the
every
power.
time you go back and look, you can look at the same process. I mean, you do look at the same process. That's what Lean's all about. You find something different.
Yeah,
Whether it's an
exactly.
outside set of eyes, or whether it's new member to the team, or just coming in, and it's like, well, why don't you do it this way? It's like, well, yeah, that's a pretty good
Huh,
idea.
I hadn't thought about that.
But that is key, and I know maybe we're going to talk about it a little bit later on. But team makeup is a
Yes.
key portion of any lean event. I mean, on the negative side, it just takes one person who's a naysayer, and they can they can destroy the whole event just because of their personality. So you really need to make sure that you have the correct team in place for any type of activity, whether it's flow and linkage or whatever, because you're not going to get the right event if you don't have the right people. And then even that goes within disciplines as well. You need the right person from ME, the right person from supply chain, the right quality person, because not everybody's at that same level of lean where you go with the flow, and you're comfortable with change, basically. I mean, that's really what lean manufacturing really is. It's change, and just being how comfortable you are with change.
Yes, it's so
You
true.
want people who are comfortable with change, because that's what you're doing going through the event. It's all change, and some
Yeah.
people are not comfortable with change.
Yeah, it's true. And I know you've come across a lot of people like that as well as
Right.
I have too. And
Yep.
it can be really, really disconcerting for the leader and for the facilitator when you come
Yep.
across one of those difficult people.
Yep.
How do you deal with that? It kind of goes along with the culture and
Yep.
how the
Oh, it does.
culture impacts it.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah. And what I found from my experience, I mean, it's if you end up with somebody like that on the team, which you can, because you can't know everybody and kind of where they are on the change scale or whatever.
Yeah.
Uh, I found that the team does a really good job of helping that individual or individuals into the correct terminology or the correct way of thinking, or just getting them to where they need to be. And that's as simple as just most lean events start off with training.
Yes.
That's important, because not everybody is on the same page. So
True.
you kind of assess the team. I mean, you can do that much. You're just talking amongst yourselves before the event starts, and then
True.
you can decide which training you kind of need to get everybody on the same page. And I've seen it happen during an event. Somebody that started off as a big naysayer, they're saying, "Oh, give me this at the end of the event. I'll take care of that." And it does happen, because they take on the mentality of the team.
Yeah, that's
The
true.
team gets that person to where they need that person to be.
So it's kind of like an 80-20
Yeah,
type rule even on an event. So if you've
yeah,
got
no, it is.
80% on board and then 20% that's not, hopefully the 80% can switch the
Yep,
20.
yep. And that doesn't happen every time. I mean,
No.
there's events that I've also been on where you've had to bring somebody else in from an organization because that person wasn't the right person, and that's okay to do that as well.
Yeah.
An event it takes on its own life, and you might start off with going and attacking one thing, and then you find out that the event's really about something completely different, which again is complete change because you've done the scope sheet for doing something, but as you're going along, it's like, well, this makes more sense, and this is what we should be changing to.
I'm so glad you said that, because sometimes as a facilitator, you feel like you're a failure because you weren't able to get all of the people on board for the event. But it is 100% okay to kick people out of the event.
Yep.
If they're not, working towards the same goal or even in the same direction, it's 100% fine to say, you know what, this isn't a good fit. We need you to leave.
Yep.
It's
Yeah,
okay
absolutely.
to do that. Thank you for saying that, because not many people think of that. They think, no, you're going to stay on that event until you change them.
Right.
But some people don't
Some
change.
people are not going to change. Even, and you can also get a lot of people that understand the lean concepts, at a cerebral level, but it's the change thing. It's like, it's fine, understanding and reading it from a book and being able to quote it, but you've got to go out and do it. At the end of the day. And that comes down, like I said, to change, and how comfortable they are with change. That person's probably not a person that's very comfortable with changing any aspect of their life or work life and personal life.
Yeah, we at Leanbrella call that culture climate. So it's understanding your culture climate. So maybe you've got somebody that's like gung-ho, let's try all of this stuff. Even if it fails, it's going to be okay.
Right.
Those are the types of people you want on a Kaizen event.
Right.
But the ones that are kind of like, nope, this is the way I've always done it. This is how it's going to be. They'd be good for outside eyes.
Yeah, exactly.
But not necessarily for leading an event.
Right.
But oh goodness, it's so true. So we at Goodrich, that word of linkage, we talked about that a little bit earlier. So we often in a continuous improvement world hear about the term flow or continuous flow or one piece pull or pull systems versus push systems and stuff. Why do you think we added the term linkage? Why do you think we did?
Yeah, I think it's important, and part of the lean transformation. You start with the cell layout, and then you get into true, what I would call linkage, really, in going to the suppliers and asking the suppliers to bring you parts when you need parts. You start off typically with, you've got to have a Kanban first of all, so you've got a high low level, but we got completely away from that, and we had on our line in Foley, again, we had our own supermarket at the end of the line. So ideally, Nirvana is having the parts come from the supplier in a kit that can be rolled off the truck and can be rolled right down to the line at the appropriate tack time change. That would be, and that's really difficult to do, obviously, because there's so many things that can go wrong. So, we had a supermarket, and some of these kits would come from the supplier, and then they would just go into the supermarket. So then they could just go into the supermarket, then down to the line when they're needed. But then some of them would just come in kits, but then we would still make them into kits for the certain station that they were going to be delivered to. So we actually had, imagine this, attack time of an hour and 50 minutes. So we had people going down and delivering the carts to where they needed to be at the tack time change, and then they take the old ones back, and it's just a continuous thing. And that would happen 4 times a day, and it would happen just like that. Tack time change, you'd see all the carts going down the line, and so it's really visually been able to see how the line is linked. So that is the best example really of linkage to the whole process. And that gets a little difficult to do when you go to the suppliers. I think that was one of the things that we thought would be easier. It's like, it's really easy. Well, just give me these, hold open rods in this particular box, and and just put them on a truck and
ship them.
Pick them up, and they'll just show up. But suppliers need to be convinced about the WIFM as well.
Yes.
Which is fine, I mean, it just means that you've got to have more supplier integration events, and you've got to start off small, and
Yes.
then you can kind of get going, which that takes longer to do that.
Yes,
But,
it does.
we were wanting to get all the suppliers on board right away, and we did it the correct way. We started with all the major suppliers. You go through, and then also suppliers as well. They have their own level of leanness as well.
Yes,
so
they do.
you don't want somebody who's not really a lean supplier. Trying to go to kits right away. I mean, that's something that you get to.
Yeah. Yeah, it's true. Having been part of that continuous improvement team in the supply chain, I remember going into some of the suppliers thinking to myself, oh my goodness, are they ever going to get there? And then have this kitting event I'm thinking of in particular. We knew what the program wanted. So the program at home base, if you will, we knew what the program wanted. And we knew that the supplier wanted and had the desire to get that there.
Right.
So we ended up making these kits, and I think they're still used in Foley.
Yeah.
We made the kits out of half a box of cardboard.
Yeah.
And then we filled it with that quick setting foam.
Yeah.
And then pushed the parts into it.
Yeah.
Because it was, creativity before capital, if you will.
Oh, right, exactly. Yeah. That's what the suppliers sometimes get wrapped around. Well, it's going to cost us this.
Right.
Yeah. But the whole value chain, it's looking at the part right from the customer right the way to a supplier and supplier even, is going to be a benefit, and eventually that's going to be a benefit to you because you're a lean supplier and you're going to be a key supplier to us, and you're going to get new business with us.
Yes.
You've got to help them get through that process, and like, some of the, I've seen kits with like egg cartons and stuff like that. It is creativity before capital, and it's just a question. Sometimes it's just 20 parts that are just kind of taped together instead of taped together and then with packaging material around them, and then in a box, and literally we have parts at Foley where it was taking them an hour to undo all the boxes when everything arrived from the milk run on Thursdays. So just eliminating that, getting obviously the parts have got to be protected, but you can give ways to protect parts.
Yeah.
And put them in a place where you can just take them out, and maybe it is a little bit of coverage, but then you just kind of have it to do once and not 5 times. And you've got all that waste as well. You've got all that dunnage left over from cardboard that needs to be gotten rid of.
Yeah, I remember having long discussions about rotables. So how can we make this kit usable again, so we ship it back, or and how do we make shipping it back cost effective as well, because that can get pricey too. So then we talked about milk runs, and
that's exactly what we were doing. We had kits from Riverside, Mexicali, and Chula Vista that came on the Goodrich milk run, which is really what it was, coming out to Foley. And also I will say that those milk runs as well that we were already paying for anyhow. If you could get suppliers on that milk run, that really helps as well.
It was awesome.
We did that at Riverside with a couple of suppliers in that area. They just delivered their parts to Riverside and they got put on the Riverside truck. Now there's potential issues with that as well, if the parts get damaged or whatever, but it certainly helps from a standpoint of getting the parts and being in a rotable container. It does make a difference. But you do have to deal with issues of damage and things like that, and then who's going to repair it. But again, that's just communication type stuff. You've just got to do the thing that makes most sense for the value stream.
It's so true. And based off of, this continuing work experience with, especially with the programs, because you've worked on a lot of programs. Right. Where did you personally, as a leader, try to implement Linkage and Flow, and what was successful and, what wasn't successful? Because not every single Kaizen event is successful, right? And then does the experience of the team doing the work matter? Do you think?
Yeah, so a lot of this is what I've already talked about in little bits as we've been going along. So I mean, the biggest thing that we did was the lean transformation in Foley, where we, basically blew up the whole line and redid it. And remember as well, whilst we were doing all this, we'd already delivered 7,000 units to the customer.
Oh,
So
wow.
it was a mature program, but
Yeah.
we still went back, and
Redid it
to get more benefit in terms of inventory and cost. So we ended up taking out 40% reduction in inventory and a 25% reduction in cost after 7,000 units.
Holy
So
cow.
an amazing job
That's amazing.
that the team did, and it was all, like I said, it was the cell layout and the supermarkets that I've already talked about, the robot, all that was part about it. And it was even going through that and the Drivematics, it was getting everybody's buy-in, getting the plant managers buy-in, making sure we got the teams buy-in and also the operators buy-in as well.
Yeah.
That's not something we've talked about much, but all these events as well, it works a lot better if you've got an operator that understands why we're actually doing this, and it's going to benefit him or her in the long run. So I think we did a really good job about that, of getting the operators involved, because there was a lot of change.
A lot.
And they see you working away in this room, and it's like, they're coming up with stuff and they know that it's going to impact them, but they don't really know how it's going to impact them.
Right.
We made a concerted effort to make sure that, I mean, obviously you can't get every single, you've got 70 operators on your line, on 90, I guess we were back then. But, you certainly get the buy-in from the operators that you can, as many as you can get through, really.
Yeah,
and
definitely.
then that helps when you're actually, rolling it all out, so they've seen and they know kind of the general idea on what you're trying to accomplish, and it's much easier then for them to accept it.
How it's going to impact the operator is huge.
Yeah.
Most of these, especially on the scale that you're talking about, that bigger scale where it's more like a kaikaku type event.
Yeah.
The operator, if the operator doesn't know what's coming down the pipeline for them, that can be extremely dramatic and traumatic for them.
Right. Yep.
But luckily for us, our culture was so ingrained at that facility, particularly in Foley.
Right.
Most of the operators were pretty open to any change that would happen. It was pretty rare when you'd meet somebody that.
Right. I mean, I would say, 95% plus were open to it. I mean, that's why it was such a good facility, and they were open to change, and, why they did so well with taking hours out of products and reducing inventory.
Yeah, for sure. Amazing facility.
Yeah.
And from what I understand, it's still that way. So
yeah, no, I'm sure it is. I mean, I think the NEO is the biggest program down there now. But I mean, it's the facility that's ingrained with the culture of change, and doing lean events and redoing lean events, and they do work. There's a really good flow and linkage actually between the value streams and the Foley facility.
Yes,
which I think that's was been developed over time, with different value stream leaders and the different plant managers at Foley. I think there's always been that really good relationship. So I think that really helps from a culture standpoint. It's not like, all the value streams doing this and, all the facilities doing this. What really was, when we did the scope sheet was done together.
Yes.
It wasn't kind of just done in a vacuum. It was like, okay, Daryl say at Foley, we're going to do this event, and it would be on our macro plan. It would be on his macro plan as well, the same event. So there was that flow and linkage between the value streams and the facility.
Very
which
much
that's really important as well, because you can get facilities and value streams going in different directions sometimes.
Very much so. And like we talked about before, when you recognize that they're going in different directions, there's different things that you can do. If it's just on the particular event that you're working on at that point in time, you can ask that individual to
Right.
step aside.
Yep.
You may have to ask them to leave the event.
Right.
If it's something bigger like program against program or
Right.
something like that, you may have to get more people involved in it.
Right.
But for the most part, especially if the culture is right, usually just taking an individual aside is enough.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I can say with all my, and I've been dealing with the Foley facility since it opened, really, in the late 80s, with the 757 program that was down there. And I've always had a great relationship with the leadership there, and we've always had that give and take that you need between value streams and facilities.
Yeah, always a great relationship with them.
And that is really important. I know one of the questions was culture. I mean, so culture is such a key part of any activity, whether it's flow and linkage, standard work, or RTPR, percent load, whatever you want to talk about the lean tools. It's key, really.
Yeah, for sure. It at Leanbrella, we don't even start talking about the lean tools until they've gone through culture climate,
right,
of one way or another. Because it's too hard to push water uphill. As I say to people, you got to know your culture before you start implementing something like this, because otherwise it is like pushing water uphill.
Right.
It's rough.
And that culture does start with leadership as well.
Yes.
You've got to be able to walk the talk, because people see that right away, and they see right through you if you just kind of spouting this tool and that tool, but not really meaning what you say. So it is key. And just being visible, like when I used to go down to Foley, I mean, I'd always do my walking the line down there. You talk to the mechanics, and you get to know people. So it's really key. And I'd keep them involved with the value stream financials, so that they all knew how their work in Foley was impacting the program as a whole. Which again is key, and and that is all part of the culture as well. They want to know how well they're doing.
Yeah.
And if we've had gain share programs, so obviously what they're doing impacts their gain share. So it's key. Yeah, right. I mean, they understand that if they do well, they're going to make money out of it. So I mean, that's one of the drivers. But even when in years where we didn't have gain share, I mean, the guys in Foley would still exactly the same. I mean, they do always do the right thing, because customer comes first. It's
so true. Oh, they're such a good team down there. I miss them a lot. So we've talked a lot about different industry type experiences, but before we close out today, I'd love for you to share a little bit more about some of the charitable work that you're involved in, and maybe help the rest of our listeners know what great things you're doing from a creativity perspective.
So last year, when I introduced my book, the first edition of my book,
it's fabulous, by the way. I love it.
Good. Yeah, I've got a lot of really good feedback, but it's just difficult to get it out to that mass audience, even though it's on Amazon. People have still got to find it.
Yeah.
So actually, the big news is that I'm reintroducing it for a second edition at the end of this month.
Fab.
By 22nd, and I've got a bit more of a marketeer that's helping me this time. So we're trying to get to a wider audience, and try and actually, I mean, one of the goals is to get to the Amazon bestsellers list. Get on that list. But the main thing is to get it out to a wider audience.
Great.
So that I can have more people reading it and helping more kids, because as I was saying, it was a fundraiser for Teddy Bear Cancer Foundation, which is a really cool foundation in Santa Barbara that helps families whose children have got cancer. And what I like about it is it's not just the finances. They don't just give money, they give you the educational and the emotional support as well,
That's wonderful.
which is key when anybody's going through cancer.
Especially
so we raised
children.
$10,000 for Teddy Bear Cancer Foundation last September.
Wow.
And so with this reintroduction, hoping to raise more money as well for them this year also. And then I'm got my second book that I've already kind of written. So I'm just in the process of finding an illustrator for that. My other illustrator's too busy at the moment, so I'm going to have to start from square one there. But that's okay. It'll get done, and we'll get round to it. And I mean, my big message to everybody, which is from a creative standpoint, is I try and tell everybody, let your imagination run wild, reach for the stars, and make your dreams come true. And that applies to, people who are thinking about retirement.
Mm-hmm.
If you've got something else that you really is your passion, just do it. And I know quite a few people from Goodrich have done that. And like yourself, you started your own business, and that's the cool thing about it. It is your passion, and it's what you want to do, and you just got to have the courage to be able to do it, and the imagination to be able to imagine it. I mean, a little slogan that I've also got that goes along with that, is see it, believe it, and then do it. So kind of see what you want to do, and then the big thing is just believing that you can actually do it. And then you can get to executing it and actually doing it.
I love it.
And then you build your own connections through you find when you're following your passion like that, the kind of people you just find people.
Yeah.
Which is really interesting how that works, and you keep
like-minded.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn. I mean, I need to post a little bit more than I do, but I'll that is one of my goals, to be able to do that a little more often. But that takes time as well.
It does.
To do
a lot of time.
Yeah, and it's a daily thing for some of those things.
Yeah.
And then so I know you said it was okay to do this at the beginning, so I'd just like to give everybody my my website, so
yes,
you can
please
kind of check out what I'm doing and everything from there, and you'll be able to order my book from Amazon, like I said, on the 22nd of July, either through my website, where I can still personalize copies, or just directly with Amazon, and I'll have that link with Amazon in a couple of weeks. So it's it's www.petergmartin.com.
Fabulous.
Everything you want to know about me and my book writing is on that website.
I love it. It's so great. I visited it as well. It's a great website. That's actually how I purchased your book as well.
Oh, good.
Was through that, and we'll make sure as part of Leanbrella that we share as well. Yeah, it's great work that you're doing, because oftentimes I think people limit themselves by their own belief.
Well, I mean,
great.
The other thing is, there are, I mean, you've probably read the book, but there are messages in the book as well. It's all about having that boundless imagination to do what you really want to do. And, it's been able to help each other through, in my book, Dragons on the Moon, it's helping each other to face their fears, the brother and the sister. And then it's, recognizing that true character lies within, so they're all kind of things that it's a really good message for kids of any age, and even adults to a certain extent.
For sure.
Yeah.
Especially after the year we had, right?
Yeah.
We need that message.
Right. And the big thing is just, using your imagination. I really think that's one of the things that we've kind of lost as a civilization, almost, as human beings.
Agreed.
We don't use our imagination as much as we need to do, and then dream up and dream big and follow our own path. I think society is kind of telling us a little bit about what we should be consuming instead
Yep.
of, the other way around, like with games and
Yep.
even music, media to a certain extent. I mean, all that is kind of focused, especially on young people. And, it's like,
bombarding
well,
them.
I've got to play this game because TV told me I had to play this game. Well,
Yeah.
maybe, read a book and get your imagination going. And, I've had kids actually, and these are younger kids, obviously, but, they have the book read to them and they get into a cardboard box and dream that they're going to the moon, and they're
So
talking
cool.
about their golf clubs that they're bringing with them. And they're talking about, what it's like to go to the purple moon and meet the dragons. And so it's just encouraging, imagination and play like that. It can only help in the kids' development in the future.
I love it too, because it encourages, I love that it's a brother and a sister too.
Yeah.
Because it encourages the sciences to a certain
Right.
extent as well.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's great. I absolutely loved it.
Good.
Thank you. Thank you for
I'll-
writing it.
I'll ask you for an Amazon review.
I definitely will. I loved it.
Yeah,
Well,
great.
thank you so much,
Yeah.
Peter. This has been a fantastic opportunity. I've really enjoyed our discussion today, and
Yeah.
hopefully we can have you come back.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
That'd be great.
Whenever you want, just call me and I'll be there for you.
Awesome. Well,
That's a
thank
song,
you.
isn't it? Call me and I'll be there, something like
Yes,
that.
yeah, I'll be there.
I'll be there. That's what I was thinking of.
I love it.
All right. Well,
thank you
thanks
again.
very much for inviting me, Michelle. I
You are
appreciate it.
most welcome. I am so happy that things are going so well for you, and definitely check out Peter's book. It's fantastic. The charitable work that he's doing as well is just absolutely needed in today's world. So please, please, please check it out. And we'll see you next month. Thank you.